this opening session today, Holistic Inclusive Learning Experiences Beyond Compliance, with our new guest. This is Tejaswini Mulay. And Tejaswini is actually in India, and I always love bringing in speakers from a global perspective. I think that is so important in L&D to have folks from around the world participate in our events. Here's a bio on Tejaswini. Tejaswini is a purpose-driven learning experience professional with 12 plus years of experience in orchestrating end-to-end learning cycles, passionate for skills development, learning, and inclusion, pioneered and led initiatives to weave accessibility and inclusion in learning experiences supported by a diversity leader certification, enthusiastic practitioner for people support and growth, an ICF certified coach partnering with individuals to guide their exploration and journey to achieve personal and professional goals, and currently leading an L&D profile at a global fintech. All right, and with that, Tejaswini, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen and let you take over. Thanks for doing this.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction, Louis. Hi, everyone. Greetings for the day wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's evening for me. Let me share my screen and we can get started. Okay. Is my screen visible to everybody? Louis, can you confirm? Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, great. Thank you. All right, so we are here to talk about designing holistic, inclusive learning experiences which go beyond compliance. And before I begin to say what I have to say, I need to set some context. And for that, I wanted to start off by sharing a short story about me, my background, and how I started on this journey of accessibility and inclusion, because this is important to understand where this topic comes from and why do I say what I say today. So for starters, I did not begin the learning and in my journey as a career in the learning and development field. I started off in the world of accessibility, in fact, where I was doing my doctoral thesis to research how visually impaired children access information. It was an exploratory research, and that got me introduced to the world of accessibility. In fact, one interpretation that came in from the research was how information needs and information seeking behavior of visually impaired children is hugely affected by the ease of access to information. Right, it changed the information that they needed, it changed the information seeking behavior that they displayed, which often led to exclusion to their exclusion from the world of information because it was very limited, which was a crucial, and information, access to information is a crucial element to survive and thrive in this world. So this research, of course, got me my doctoral thesis, but it also got me hooked on to the concepts of accessibility and even more the concept of inclusion. Fast forward to my current life, where in the corporate world of L&D, of course, still an advocate of accessibility, and I practice that. But I was reintroduced to the term called inclusion at a very broad level, which means inclusion for all, people with disabilities or people without disabilities as well. And my experience so far has led me to realize that my idea of inclusion at the beginning, I'm still learning, of course, but at the beginning was limited and it was not truly inclusive at all. So, the best approach in such a scenario where you do not know what you do not know, and otherwise also, is to work towards inclusion for all. Right? So, what I'm going to say today is from my observation and experience from a mixed world of accessibility, the academic, where I studied children, and right now the corporate learning and development world, where I come from recently. And that's how all of this is based. So let's dive in right away. I would want to ask, and maybe Louis can read to me from the chat, what does an inclusive learning experience mean to you when I say that?
Okay, I'll go ahead and read those off as
Yeah.
they come in. Repeat that
Yeah.
question one more time.
What does an inclusive learning experience mean to you?
Okay, from Kayleen. Kayleen saying it means everyone feels welcomed, valued, and included. Priscilla says no learner is left behind.
Yes.
Lisa
Yeah.
Crockett says I can see myself in the learning. Gabriela Delgado Sap says everyone can learn. Renee says when all learners can learn and no one feels singled out
Yes.
or left behind. Nancy says everyone feels welcome and is able to access all materials. And Deborah says accessible to all who want to attend.
Yes. Yes. Very, very beautifully said. Everybody, thank you for sharing your views there. Let me get into one definition. So there are many definitions of what an inclusive learning experience means. And the image, let me also quickly describe the image on the right. It is a puzzle that has come through, and it has a variety of puzzle pieces that says language, ethnicity, culture, skills, physical abilities, sexual orientation, age, etc. So, an inclusive learning experience means creating an educational environment where all students or learners, regardless of their backgrounds, abilities, or learning styles, feel valued, supported, and have equal access to learning opportunities. Right? And I've highlighted a few words here: abilities, learning styles, and equal access.
Hey,
Yeah.
Tejaswini, your
Yes.
slide isn't moving, so you might wanna I think we're still seeing your opening slide.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I am on the definition of inclusive learning. Do you see that? No?
No, we're still on
Oh, okay.
the opening slide.
Shall I stop sharing and reshare? Just a second.
Sure, that might do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, folks are saying that you maybe you were possibly sharing the wrong screen, so resetting
Oh,
that
I
process.
just have one screen, so
Mhm.
I'm hoping it goes well now. Okay, what do you see now?
There we go. That's it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So yes, so I was describing the image first, and then I talked about the definition here. That's where we were. And I've highlighted these few words in the definition. And it kind of how beautifully encompasses what all the answers that we received right now from the audiences in the chat, which is wonderful. So, to talk about inclusive learning experiences, I'm sure we can take care of the abilities part by being, let's say, compliant to the W3C accessibility norms, right? The World Wide Web Consortium norms. And maybe the learning styles is, well promoted by the Universal Design Guidelines, learning guidelines. So we have a couple of guidelines and principles in place where some people might follow just W3C, some people might follow UDL, some people might follow everything, whatever is available, which is good. So when you're following, let's say, for example, W3C and UDL for now, there is definitely a double positive effect that it has on inclusion, because with W3C, certain things would be taken care of, and UDL would give you a different perspective on working towards inclusion. So being compliant definitely has a positive effect on inclusion. But what happens here now, when I read the definition earlier for inclusive learning experiences, there was this crucial part about feeling valued, supported, and included, right? And a lot of you also mentioned that in your answer. And that is what brings everything together, is what I feel, based on the experience and observations that I've had so far. because following guidelines and principles, of course, takes you on the right track, but might not necessarily take care of how the learner is feeling, if they're feeling valued, supported, and included. And that remainder part that is missing here, might be missing out of the equation, is what takes you actually closer to achieving a holistic, inclusive learning experience. So that leads me to the next question then. In fact, two sub questions. Then, what is it that takes us beyond compliance to have a holistic approach to create inclusive learning experiences? Any thoughts on that in the chat?
I'll read off anything that comes through. What is taking us beyond compliance? What helps to have a holistic approach to create inclusive learning experiences? Kayleen says empathy, thinking from your learner's perspective. That's great. We
Yes.
had a session on empathy
Amazing.
yesterday.
Yes. Yes.
Nancy says look at the whole person and all their needs.
Yes.
Adriano is saying by thinking about the individual. Gabriella adds the wish and desire to reach everyone without borders.
Yes. Yes. Amazing. Amazing. And I'm so glad to see different things coming up in the answers, and we are going towards the right answer here. So, my short answer is very simple. It's to have an inclusive mindset and to have it on all the time. It's not just, you can't, no, you have to have that lens or the hat on all the time. And that is what is going to be the key on top of the compliance. Now, before I dive deeper into this, let's take a quick look at what an inclusive mindset means, at least for our as a base for our session today. So, an inclusive mindset is defined as a combination of self-defining values, social, emotional, and cognitive skills, and direct actions to engage with and support others. So exactly what some of y'all said, right? Empathy, looking at the individual, etc., etc. That's the combination here. That is what is going to, bridge the gap, the tiny gap that exists at times. And the answer is inclusive mindset. That's always on. Let's get in a little deeper here exactly. So based on my experience and observations so far, you're likely to make the learners feel supported and included if you have this inclusive mindset all the time and you truly aspire to make the learners feel a part of the learning experience, which means that do not limit your efforts to applying only guidelines while you design, develop, and deliver your content. And of course, the intention to make the learners feel included and the inclusive mindset together will lead you to that holistic inclusion goal that we are talking about here. Let's get a little deeper there. So if I know I made a tiny equation. So if you say guidelines plus the inclusive mindset, which is raised to the fact that it's the intent to make the learners feel included, is going to be equal to a holistic inclusive learning experience. It might sound very simple or obvious. It is, but it is not necessarily included all the time. The inclusive mindset is not on all the time, is what I have experienced. Why I say this is, very often we're too engrossed in complying to what is said, which is not wrong, and we miss looking beyond the norms that consume us. And with a tiny change or a tweak, in the mindset, which is the inclusive mindset, the compliance that we are already doing is enhanced, and we are likely to have a more efficient and innovative and a holistic, inclusive learning experience, which is the desired outcome that we are set to achieve. Now, I'm going to get a little in depth here on how do you then cultivate an inclusive mindset, and then extrapolate those um inclusive mindset aspects onto the steps that we have for creating a learning experience, so that we can say, okay, this is how you create an inclusive mindset, and this is how you apply it here in this process, in as a learning experience creator, or whatever title you all may have. um, and I have an image here on the right, and I'll explain it first. So it says exclusion, of course, where every people are not excluded, not everybody is included. Then there is this reasonable adaptation, where we are trying to include people by giving them tools and supporting them with some additional efforts from our side. And then there's total inclusion, where the barriers are totally removed, or at least there is an effort to remove the barrier totally. I'm sure this is a very popular image and used in a variety of formats everywhere, but I thought it's relevant today as well. So how do you do include this inclusive mindset and apply it to that inclusive experiences, where those barriers are removed as much as we can? There are four easy or not so difficult steps, and I'll read it out first, and then I'll go into each step and how I interpret it and how we could apply it to the learning experience creation process. First is the intent of inclusion, right? It has to be intentional inclusion. Then, to be inclusive, there also has to be an element of looking inwards, and asking a few questions to ourselves in the process, and I'll explain what. And there always has to be a continuous inquiry, which is supported with curiosity, empathy, and an inclusive mindset again. Because although we are trying to improve on the inclusive mindset, there has to be this effort. And of course, then whatever you learn out of all these steps, then you form a loop, and for better inclusion in the next time you're doing everything to create a new learning experience, right? So intentional inclusion again starts by first is in a normal learning experience creation process, you would start to understand by who are your learners, right? Let's say if you're in a corporate learning and development situation, you would say, okay, I've got a group of quality testers as my learner group. But here, the intention with intentional inclusion, you need to know your learners from not just their work profiles, the experience that they bring in, and also recognize the value. Not just be aware, but recognize the value of what they're bringing onto the table. In workplace scenario, for example, if I'm conducting a workshop for people, I understand that there would be participants coming in with different levels of experiences, and that in itself could be an indicator for my intentional inclusion, to be aware that I might need to modify the way I interact with each of those participants, to make sure that they feel supported enough to get maximum gain out of that learning experience that they are a part of. That's a very basic example. So the first step then is, I'm going to repeat, intentional inclusion, which begins by awareness that you have a mix of learners coming in a corporate setting. Especially, you might not know if you're looking at a particular type of disability or ability, or what is it that is coming to the table, because there will be only a limited amount of data that you would know about your learners, the experience or the expertise or things like that, but not necessarily the other data, like the ethnicity or the physical abilities, or those kind of data might be limited because of a lot of other things. So one is awareness, and second one is to be to recognize the value that they're bringing in, and how you would need to modify, and the readiness to modify needs to be done during an e-learning or a workshop creation process, whatever that learning intervention is. The second step is to look inward, which will help us to be aware of our own biases and assumptions that we bring into the picture as a learning experience creator. Um, the first step to look inward, then to recognize what biases and assumptions that you bring to the table, is to start by reflecting on what does inclusion mean to you. What is your outlook to look at the diversity of population that you're dealing with? And that understanding of your own biases and assumptions is the very first step to get started there. For example, when I started, I was under the impression that, okay, if I'm creating a e-learning course and I've applied all the accessibility compliance checkboxes, I am going to deliver an inclusive course. I was not wrong. I was partially right. But not all. I failed to understand that there was this unconscious bias there, that not everybody is going to be comfortable to really reveal what kind of disability they have, or what kind of accommodation, even without a disability, what kind of extra accommodation that a person would be requiring. And especially in cases where the learning intervention is a leader-led workshop, or a session. It could be a virtual or an in-person session. It is highlighted, this bias and these assumptions, and could be hurdled, and it could be highlighted even more in such cases. Now, once you have, you've begun this reflection and looking inward, you're also, asking then, what else? What else am I missing here? And that could also reveal a lot of things as you create your learning experiences based on and of course, one example that I could cite here is on a leader-led workshop. I had, on the typical design development approach, I had designed some activities for my participants in the workshop, and I was very based on my prior assumption that all my learning interventions are going to be inclusive, because I am accessibility compliant and I have a broad understanding of what this looks like. What happened is, I assumed that because I've designed it with, because I felt it was a inclusive learning experience, I assumed that all my participants are going to participate very actively. And in one such interaction, I realized that that's not true. People are hesitant, even although they are very, seasoned professionals coming in from, they have their expertise in certain areas according to their work profile. They were hesitant, and one such participant was very hesitant to even interact and share the activities that were given as a part of the workshop. And that is why my aha moment, where my assumption came crackling, and it was because of a tiny thing that I had missed doing, because I did not have my inclusive mindset hat on, was to just explicitly state there that this learning space is going to be an open, inclusive learning space for everybody to interact and learn. And there are not going to be any tags around what you answer, what you ask, and what you share. So there would be no tags around good or bad or right and wrong. And that particular interaction helped me learn that this needs to be called out explicitly. And I failed in the earlier intervention because of my assumption that it's already inclusive. And of course, that was a learning moment. And then I made sure that I have it on my slides every time, and I call it out explicitly every single time. And it has has had massive positive impact on how learners perceive an inclusive space. And it need not be around disability all the time, but it could be just, to, let's say, if I'm an anxious participant, it's not a disability, but I'm just anxious being a adult learner in a training program right now. I don't know why am I here, blah blah blah, whatever the reason is. And that could also be an hindrance to being totally to feel supported and valued and to feel included in a learning experience. The what else part then leads to where can I improve and be effective, and I answered that through the example that I just cited. When I realized that this is the else that I can improve right now, and this is how I can improve it, and then that itself leads to a whole lot of clarity around looking at my own biases. Okay, this is what I was doing wrong, and this is how I can correct it. The third an important question that you need to ask yourself is who else can be involved. You are aware that there is a mixed group that you are entertaining for learning purposes. What is the diverse perspective that you're bringing into that process of your learning experience design? Let's say in your development phase or design phase or delivery phase or all the three phases, whatever your process is. Whom are you including, and in the process to bring in those perspectives in the first place? So let's say if you have a big L&D team and you have your own project to run, is there somebody else from your L&D team that could give you a different perspective, or somebody else from the stakeholders team, or is there an ERG group in your organization that you can get involved, maybe in the design phase or in the design and the delivery phase? Maybe they could be a pilot learners where you test out things with them. So bringing in those different perspectives is also a huge learning curve for yourself in the process of cultivating an inclusive mindset in the first place. So looking inwards, these couple of questions could help you start on the self-reflection journey. And the next point around in cultivating an inclusive mindset is to always inquire with curiosity, empathy. And this comes in from the fact that what is your intent and how is your intent to make the learners feel valued, supported, and included. Now, depending on the learner intervention, you could, let's say, if it's the e-learning format, you say that you always, I'm sure, have a feedback form to understand whether the learning objective was met. There could be questions in your formal feedback around how they felt supported, or it could be an indirect question about if they felt included in the learning experience. Did they participate well? That participation could be a form of inclusion for them. An indirect way to do this is to learn to read between lines on how your participants interact during a workshop. For example, if workshop is an intervention, and those responses and the way people are interacting could also indicate whether you need to inquire more, whether you need to be curious. And of course, that inquiry has to be very empathetic. One such example is when a person in one of my workshops, during summarizing his learning experience, right? I usually have a method where the learners would summarize their learning experience at the end of the intervention. And then the one person said, I tend to be an introvert, and I do not participate as much verbally or interact in a collaborative space, but to my surprise I did a lot better this time, and I could gain a lot of experience just by interacting with my fellow learners. Now this particular statement was, I could deduce that the learner felt supported and included because of, let's say, it was explicitly stated that this was an open space, or whatever those activities and the way the activities were designed. So these could be being curious in how your participants interact and being empathetic on what they have to say to you and what do you learn from them is also going to be a very important step on cultivating an inclusive mindset. Uh, Another such incident would where I could think of inquiring with curiosity and empathy is one of my participant, an adult learner, a very seasoned professional, said I would not be sharing my activity online. I think I just shared that example. But when I inquired, and I was very curious, and I inquired, why is it so? What is there an issue because you are not able to finish your assignment, or because you're not able to share it online? Is a technical issue? And then the participant just said, I am not sure if I did it right. And I'm not sure if I want to share it amongst all the fellow learners here, because he was very anxious about it. And that is a moment I had to clarify around my own instruction around the activity. Now, I designed an inclusive activity, but my instructions were not inclusive enough. Wherein I said the aim of the activity is for you to understand the concept, and when you submit your activity, the overall goal is not to rate you on the activity, but just to give you a hang of whether you have understood the concept. And that one statement from my side relaxed that participant, and that participant was able to then share the activity and participate well in the learning intervention. So these kind of tiny steps definitely help you cultivate an inclusive mindset. Although I've given quite a few examples around which how it has helped me personally, I think it will be a good idea to for me to try and extrapolate these particular points to different stages of a learning experience creation. What I think will be useful is on the left hand side, and I'll read it out. In the design phase, I'm going to read out the usual things that anybody in a learning and development profile would do to be inclusive. And on the right side, I've tried to extrapolate the inclusive mindset steps and how it can be different in each in this particular phase of learning experience design. So, for example, in the design phase, you're going to make sure that the development happens there's an inclusive language, the activity design or the collaboration opportunities that you're creating for learners, are in place. There is enough activity so that the learning objectives are met. And you would also make sure that there is appropriate representation of diversity in whatever you're going to develop later on. So these are some basic, I'm not trying to cover everything, but some examples there. So in now with this new inclusive mindset hat on, you would set out with the intent of being inclusive, of course, and understand what else do you know about the learners that that can come into your representation or for your activities. And now then when you have a short reflection on what diversity and inclusion means to you, you could check your own biases and assumption at this phase, because then this is the ground phase of your entire learning experience creation. Because if you are not setting it right in the design phase, then it could percolate into the development and the delivery phase as well. So it's very important that you understand what biases or assumptions are you bringing into the process unknowingly, of course, and how can you then work around it to give some correct it or modify it. And also this is also a right phase to check whom else can you include in the process, whether is it your colleagues from a different L&D team, or there are other teams that can get involved. Are there any learners that can get involved in the pilot testing, or are there any ERG groups that can get involved right in the phase of design, where you know that you're on the right track in the first go itself. So some extrapolation of the inclusive design mindset to the design phase of learning experience creation. Similarly, then now when you move on to the development stage, so of course you're going to make sure that now that your design phases has a outline that is all inclusive, the development is in line with the inclusive design outline. Of course there could be hiccups typically with learning development software, especially, that might limit how you're completing the accessibility compliance or how your inclusion can be brought in because of some technology limitations. Now, this is where the other questions could come in also. What else can be done? What else can I do? If there's some hindrance, if there's something that I'm not able to do because of one particular software, is there some other way that I can do it? Similarly to the activity that we had planned in the design phase, can the collaborators from the design phase also then test this development that I have done? The activities that I've designed, are they inclusive? Are the instructions explicit for inclusion? Now, this could be a very typical example. For example, if you are using one software as a platform for collaboration, let's say it is Microsoft Teams, and you have a group of people, learners collaborating there for some discussions. Not all your learners are going to be aware of how inclusive they can be towards fellow learners. Now, you could paste or tag a post where you have explicit instructions that could help them be inclusive and open. Right? Is the collaboration space in itself accessible enough? Hang on, is there something? Okay. And do I need to do anything extra for that space to be inclusive in itself? Because the platform at times could, give me challenges to be, although my design and my plan is very inclusive, I'm not able to do it well in the development phase because of these hiccups. And this is where I need to ask these questions and to check myself whether I'm truly in line with the inclusive approach that I've set to follow this time. Now, then when you move again towards the delivery phase, I'm sure after you, at the end of your e-learning, there's a feedback form. I've mentioned it earlier as well. But if it's a leader-led intervention, if it's a workshop, and you're asking feedback, or if you're asking the participants to summarize their learning experience, of course, I'm sure there are questions in the feedback form around how did you find the content, was the language inclusive, but there has to be specific questions that tell you whether they felt valued, supported, and included. Now, again, as I said, this could be direct through your feedback form, and this could also be indirect when they interact with you during a session. Now, I'm sure this is not possible on an e-learning intervention, but very much possible in a workshop or in a training session. In the delivery, of course, you have opportunities for learner communication and collaboration with the facilitators, and you would usually turn on the accessibility options on the elements. This is what you would usually do. Now, with the inclusive mindset hat on, it is extremely crucial to explicitly call out, if they need any support, and explicitly important to call out that your space, let's say the learning platform or the learning intervention, the training platform, you are up for inclusion. This is an open and safe space for them to collaborate and participate. Whatever that call out may be, depending on what your learning intervention, it needs to be explicitly called out. Whether it, of course, in a variety of formats. So if you're having a PowerPoint, have it on your PowerPoint and then call it out explicitly. But this simple act has massive effect on how the learners perceive things and how they participate in any learning intervention. There can be a lot of on-the-go accessibility and inclusion. Some of these, these are not new things, but how they can be tweaked is important. For example, turning on captions on Microsoft Teams. I usually have my sessions on Microsoft Teams, and there is an option for the learner or the participant to turn on live captions, right? Not everybody knows that. But even as an instructor, and because I'm sharing my screen, I have my live captions on. What it does is, of course, if there is somebody who has a hearing impairment, a slight hearing impairment, can listen to me and also try to read what is it I'm saying, so that the person does not miss out. Let's say my pace is does not match well with what he or she requires. The captions definitely help. Although the live captions not necessarily or are all they are not always correct and not always good, but they do help. Another very important use that I have found out for inclusion around live captions is understanding accents. And it has definitely helped me whenever even if I am a participant in a meeting or in a training. I usually turn it out on for myself, because I sometimes fail to understand some accents, and this is very important these days, because most of us work in global environments and virtual environments. Understanding accents could be, and although I have turned out on my captions for people who have some hearing impairment, it is also including people who cannot understand my accent. The third goal that I have recently known that I have achieved through this tiny act is, not everybody is aware of accessibility features that any platform gives, right? Especially if you're not working in the field of accessibility. Um, it is a very interesting conversation starter. People would say, "Oh, you have something on, the live captions. How do you do that, and why have you done that?" And that itself has given me a leeway into starting conversations about accessibility and inclusion. And of course, they are very the participants at times are very curious to understand. Okay, I can be inclusive too, and if they have problems, they turn it on for themselves. So, thinking on the go and tiny acts of accessibility, although this is an accessibility feature, leads to inclusion on a variety of level, not just for people with disabilities. If you're designing your learning intervention, which is a workshop, thoughts around, is your break timing enough, or the number of breaks are they enough for the duration of for the duration of the workshop. uh, I always had this question around, am I doing it right? Although I've given it a thought, right? I'm trying to be inclusive, I've given it a thought, but I'm not sure. I know we always design our learning interventions with some time buffer. We have some extra time allotted there. And I usually announce and ask at the beginning, saying, okay, this is what I've planned. I've planned a 10-minute break today. And when I announce that 10-minute break, I usually say, is this enough? I can always add a few minutes, not too much, but let's say 5 minutes more, to make sure that everybody can do whatever they have to do and then come back and then still participate and feel included in what's going on. I had this learning. I'm going a little off track here. I had an instructor, not a learner, but an instructor who was wearing a colostomy bag. He had a surgery of his intestines, and he said those 10 minutes breaks are not enough for me, because I need to go and go empty my bag and come back. And that is a point when I started asking, is this enough, or do I need to wait more for you? Of course, there is not a lot of flexibility there, but asking in itself is a gesture of inclusion. And then, of course, delivery is where that feedback and inquiry comes in. So on the left hand side, where I've said this is the usual feedback that you would do, but now with this empathetic curious inquiry, which is filled of curiosity, is a great learning opportunity, and also a gesture and an opportunity to apply the inclusive mindset here. The earlier example that I gave here, to inquire if the experience was inclusive enough, or if the person does not really understand what inclusive means, you could ask it in a variety of ways. Were you able to participate well? Were you able to learn out of the participation? What did you feel supported? during the learning intervention, or if it is your e-learning intervention where you cannot actually have a dialogue with the learner, have them included in some form in your feedback form, and then that itself could have your lead you to be more inclusive and better inclusive, which is taking you beyond compliance. We are about to conclude. Louis, are there any opinions or any thoughts that have been shared or any questions in the chat?
I don't have anything, but I do think that Adriano's last comment applies pretty well. And
Yeah.
I actually had to look this up. It was reflexivity and reflection is an important part of the
Yes.
learning environment. And I actually had to look up reflexivity because I'd never heard that before. But I think that's extremely important. And it's, and I apply it to the sessions that I build here with TLDC. With the hour breaks and things like that. But I think that is a great comment.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, I'm about to conclude, and I would just say that we are all unique. The strengths and weaknesses that we have, the abilities and inabilities, or the difference of perspectives. So that's true. And then creating an accessible and inclusive learning experience requires a continuous effort. And there are methods and processes, there are principles and guidelines that help us, on this quest, and we should, of course, hold on to it. What takes the effort beyond these rules and makes it truly holistic or complete is the mindset. And the inclusive mindset that helps us look above and beyond this compliance to innovate and sustain our goals. The goal is to create an accessible, inclusive learning experience, and that is how it can be sustained. I would read out, I've included a quote here on the slide and I'll read it out. It says, inclusion is a mindset. It is a way of thinking. It is not a program that we run or a classroom in our school or a favor we do for someone. Inclusion is who we are. It is who we must strive to be. It is a quote by Lisa Friedman from Removing the Stumbling Block. And I think it perfectly resonates with what I had to say here today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tejaswini. That was great.
Thank you so much, Louis.
Yeah, we're seeing the emojis flying by. Yeah, it's a good way to start the day for our last day of the event. Yeah, and I think that I was as you were doing your presentation, I feel like it applied a lot to the virtual sessions that we produce here at TLDC, and just help me kind of reflect on that, and also I'll probably be going back through the recording just to reassess a lot of the things that I do. So thank you for helping me circle back on that. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Louis, for the opportunity and having me here, and thank you to all the participants for interacting with me here.
Excellent. All right. Well, lots of thank yous in the chat, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and get the session closed out. I do want to remind everybody, in just over an hour, we have Deborah Harris coming in from ICU Learning, talking about exploring inclusion, barriers, burdens, and breakthroughs. Please return for that one. And then after that, we have just one more session at noon Pacific time. So just a couple more sessions left for this week. All right, everybody. There she is. There's Deborah. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close it out.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.